we've literally spent the entire day together.
We have been on some type of technology
Whole
since
day.
10 a.m.
All day. And
FaceTime,
it's been
Zoom,
lovely.
phone call, everything.
It's been so lovely.
Lovely.
And I just ate some edamame.
That's what that was your snack, huh?
It was leftovers.
And edamame was your leftover? It
I
just
did
doesn't
that, some
seem.
sushi, and then
Oh,
some
I,
shumai. I had like a whole
you
leftover
yes,
meal.
you had a you know the word I hate the most, right? Do you know the
What?
word?
No,
Okay, you
it
know how like a lot of people hate the word moist? I don't hate the word moist. Do you
doesn't
hate that
bother
word?
me. No.
What word do you hate?
Um, okay. I hate when people use, um, like food terms for things that aren't food.
Like
Like
somebody says delicious when they're talking about a sunset.
exactly. Like when someone said, like, "Oh, did you see that baby? She was so yummy." And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know why. It's just to me that I can't. You know what I mean, though?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
It's not a
Mine
specific word, it's a context, but
um
continue.
uh, mine is smorgasbord.
Smorgasbord.
I don't like this word.
Interesting.
I feel like it is like we grew up not that far from Lancaster,
Oh,
and it's like a very like
is it a
Pennsylvania
Dutch? Is it
Dutch.
like a Dutch
It's a
term?
Pennsylvania Dutch German word, smorgasbord. I'm pretty sure it means just buffet in German. I don't know if that's true,
Not
but
sure.
I don't know why. But forever, it brings up some shit for me. So let's make that our intro question for today because we have too much to talk about in today's episode. We can't get off track today.
We can't. We made it. We made up our own intro question.
That was our intro question because, well, we just have a lot to talk about because we have to talk about premarital conversations. This is a very big topic that we are going to try to put into one episode. We're going to see how this goes. Um, uh, so we have an amazing premarital course in our office. You can check it out on the website. It's fully secular. One of the reasons we developed this is we had so many people who would come in and say, like, well, the only one you can find is like pre-Cana work or like some religiously affiliated thing. A lot of folks don't identify religion anymore. So we said, all right, cool, we'll come up with it. So we have right now two amazing folks in our office, Kelly Mariani and Kate Peabody, who are offering this premarital work in this specific course that we do. So we're going to try to talk about all of them.
So, but before we start, I wanted to hit you with some stats.
Yes, please stat me up,
Okay.
baby.
We love stats. Um, there is a common misconception that divorce rates like have increased, but they've actually decreased over time. The divorce rate has actually decreased from a rate of 4 to 2.5. I'm not sure what that means actually now that I look back at that. Right? Like what does that mean? I just
I
like
don't know
wrote
where'd you
that.
get this stat from.
I'm not sure. I know it had like so many stats. I need to figure out what that means. I'm going to look back on it. However, it is decreased significantly since the year 2000
When it was 50% and
when
everyone
it was
lost their fucking
50%.
mind.
And now everyone still thinks that
It's the
it's
same
at that
stat.
and it's not.
Yeah.
But something else that I thought was very interesting that I found when I was doing research is that there are a few reasons why people cite that they got a divorce, lack of commitment or infidelity, and also couples report arguing and excessive conflict. Um, another one is that couples marry too young, and um, this one is huge financial problems as a cause for divorce. But the biggest thing that I wanted to say out of all of this is that over 70% of couples report not understanding the realities or stages of marriage. A lack of knowledge about what marriage entails is one of the leading contributing factors to divorce. In fact, 72% of couples reported they didn't fully understand the commitment involved in marriage before they tied the knot. And many divorced people say that they were surprised their partner changed over their marriage and were unable to personally cope with the new problems that arose over time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just thought that was really important because we were not taught about marriage in school. Probably should
No.
have been, or relationships or communication, any of
Yeah.
any of those things. And so because the lack of knowledge or like the expectations or what we bring into the relationship isn't there, it's something that greatly affects the longevity of your relationship. Um, and then I looked into like how important is premarital counseling for marriages. And what I found was that premarital counseling studies have shown that it can reduce the likelihood of future divorce by around 50%. It's more effective to do quality premarital counseling for about 6 to 9 months than living together as a couple before marriage.
That's interesting.
Isn't that so interesting?
Yeah.
But as Emily stated earlier, a lot of the premarital counseling programs that are out there are religious. And there are so many people who have been looking for a premarital counseling course program that is not religious. And so we made it a point to create one at the therapy group because of how important it is and because of the amount of couples work we do. And we have so many people who reach out and say, I want this. Like, I want to be able to communicate about money, to communicate about sex, to learn how to fight fairly, to that there's so many things, and to understand how my, past is affecting my relationship now. Setting boundaries with in-laws is another one. So there's just so many topics that this program tackles. And we wanted to put it out there. And then we got so many questions about it.
Yeah. So, okay, so we'll tell you a little bit about how our program works, and then we're going to go into this. So, some of the things that we hit in our program, which is how your past affects your present, boundaries and expectations, money, sex and intimacy, fighting fairly, and the future altogether. So, I know that those are huge, like sort of umbrella terms. So, we ask people to send in their questions to talk about this. But, Jen, I want to start with you.
Yes.
Is there anything you wish you knew before you were married that would have been
Yes.
helpful now?
Um, I think the thing that would have been helpful, like, one of the things is, uh, in-laws. In-laws
Yeah.
is a really big thing, and how I don't think I fully understand did the extent to which that plays a toll, not just in our relationship, but, like, on us as individuals,
Mm,
and then how that stress affects the relationship in general.
yes.
Um, so that's a piece of it, and it's the thing that, I read earlier that said, I wasn't prepared for, like, the changes. I think one of the things that's been really helpful, at least about being a couples therapist, is understanding that, like, the expectations I had going into marriage were helpful because of being a couples therapist and, like, kinda seeing that and understanding that. But when you're in it, really going through those changes is a completely different story.
Mm,
To be able to have those communication skills, to be able to have the resilience to say, like, how are we gonna work through this together? I think it takes time to build that. So, I think the knowledge of it is really important. It's another thing to experience it and to like use those tools that you
yeah.
have,
Yeah.
and to practice those tools.
Yeah.
So, that's what I would say. What about you?
Well, so in-laws are a huge one. I would
Yeah.
say for us, money, we both had, I think when you usually for most people when they come into a marriage, they are or both have their own money
Yes.
and it's separate, right? And so I think that everyone goes in with expectations that are often not communicated
Yes.
about how are we going to handle joint money and what's money going to look like and what happens when one of us starts making a lot more money than the other. And especially when it came to parent, I think the funny I was talking to actually Aaron, my
Yeah.
husband's cousin, the other day, and I was like, oh, well, like you're the best parent before you become a parent, right? Because before you become a parent, you're like, I'm never gonna let them watch the iPad. I'm never gonna let them do this. And we're never gonna fight in front of them, which is hilarious. Which actually in Adam Grant's latest book, he talks about the importance of fighting in front of your children
Yeah.
to show them how to stand up for themselves and how to
Interesting.
handle conflict. Yeah. So, but I mean, right. So before you have a parent, it's really easy to say how you're the perfect parent. Um, and it's very hard once you're in the moment to actually be human.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, in-laws, money, and parenting are huge things. And I think we talked about it as best we could, but sometimes then life hits you, right? Like, it's easy to say, "Oh, here's how we're gonna handle something," and then life throws you something totally different. So somebody had asked in, what are the best topics to cover under the in-law umbrella? Here's what I
Boundaries.
boundaries, especially boundaries around communication. What happens if your mom calls 15 times a day? What happens if your mom wants to come over all the time? What happens if your parents never want to come over and I feel like it's rejection? What happens as they get older? Are we going to take care of them? Do we help give them money? Do we pay for them? What happens if you're going to fight with your parents, or if I'm in a fight with them? Do we support each other? Do we stay out of it? What does that look like for us? And I think, something we had Julianne Taylor Shore on this show. She said something really beautiful, which is that it is not up to me to define what is a dysfunctional relationship.
Mm,
And what she meant by that is we get to make our own rules in marriage.
yeah. One of the really difficult transitions that I think couples go through is going from, the boundary around the family they grew up in to the boundary around the family that they're forming.
Mhm.
And marriage is almost a time in which that transition really starts to happen. And without the conversation or the understanding of that switch, so much can get lost in communication. And so to really understand marriage as I'm forming, a new family, and what does that boundary look like around my new family? And what does that look like in conjunction with the family I grew up in? And what does that look like in conjunction with the family you grew up in? What does communication look like? Um, another big thing I think is holidays. Like, where do we spend our holidays? What does that look like for us? What new traditions are we forming as, between the two of us, between, us and the kids, the family that you're forming? And I think that there is a lot of grief that comes with that couples aren't prepared for, because you are grieving kind of this idea of, well, this is kind of what my traditions used to look like. I'm forming new traditions, and that's really exciting. But at the same time, I'm also letting go of
Yeah.
traditions that I once had. Like, life is going to look a little different. And I don't think we are fully prepared for that part of marriage,
Yeah.
is understanding the grief that can also come with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say, we're forming new traditions and it's exciting. What happens if you don't think it's exciting?
Right. Right. Right.
What if you're
Exactly.
like, no, this all sucks?
Yes.
And
And
that's
then,
that's really hard, right? Also because especially if somebody lives far away from their family, like like a geographical, like physical way, like you might not know how it really is until like all of a sudden you're married, you spend more time with someone, or you're planning a wedding, and you're like, oh, wait a second, this
yes.
is different than I thought it was gonna be,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. There's so many little things you're just
Yeah,
like not prepared for.
yeah.
And there's so much compromise,
Hmm.
right? And like, you could talk about compromise, oh, like, I'm great at compromise. And then when you're in it, you're like, shit.
Sucks. We were talking about this the other night. We were like, we had this conversation around money, and we're just like, like the thing is like sometimes it does suck when you make a lot of money and like, but like it is joint money. And like, listen, like if my husband made all the money, I'd also want it to be mine as well. But then it's just hard, right? So like when you're single, you make this money and then you get to decide what to do with it. And then you're married, and all of a sudden you're having joint conversations if you choose to combine finances, which not everyone does.
Right.
Um, and it is hard. It's hard to not have full control. It's hard to compromise. It's hard to not always get your way.
It's so hard.
Which
It's,
my couples therapist recently said to me, Emily, you don't always get your way right. I said, what?
I'm sorry, what?
What?
Huh?
Fascinating information, Ginger. I didn't know that.
Confused. but but yeah, I think that's, and I think that's why shared goals are so important to talk about too,
Mhm.
right? I think that very much blends with boundaries, it blends with finances, because for the two of you to be on the same page with like how, what do we want to spend our money on? What does that
Yeah.
look like? Um, and so to talk about those shared goals, like what do we want to work towards, is a really important part of this conversation too.
Yeah. Somebody said, how soon? When is a good time in dating to have these conversations? Guys, we are not a good people to ask because we think it's the day of. We are biased
We're
therapists.
like, as soon as you meet.
Any dating coach would be like, don't do that. Let it be sexy at the beginning. Have a honeymoon phase. We don't ask us.
We're like, get right in there. Get
We
as
are
soon as
so
soon
biased.
as you met, what are you interested in life? Do you want to have kids? What does this look like?
The funniest part is sometimes you'll be if you're working with a client who's going through a divorce and your advice is exactly different than what the lawyer is wanting them to do.
Yes.
Like you're like, meet together and talk this out to
Right.
support your children. The lawyer's like,
Communicate.
don't talk at all.
Don't do that.
So we have to sometimes be like, listen, like sometimes the advice we give is not the advice someone else would.
Right.
We think as early as possible. And that doesn't have to mean we sit down and talk about it on date 3, but it can mean like, do you envision yourself living in a city or a suburb? Do you envision yourself always working or traveling? Do you envision yourself being staying in the city that you're in right now or moving away? Do you envision yourself like if we're traveling on holidays or going home? Like it doesn't have to be this like really awkward clinical conversation.
Yeah.
It can be like just a conversation.
Well, it also helps you like really understand how much you connect with that person, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking back to, and this is like on my first date with my husband. He said to me, "What are you looking for in a relationship?"
What a man.
I It's the simplest question,
Yeah.
but I was like, "Oh my God." I
But
was so taken aback because those questions don't typically happen on first dates. And so it was such a breath of fresh air.
but how often do people answer truthfully? The
It's
other
a good
thing is if your partner says something amazing like Bill did, are you answering honestly? Because sometimes we're not because we just want to be chosen and we're like
Yes.
trying really hard to be chill.
Yes.
Right? Like so if you're like I'm not looking for marriage. I'm just trying to have a good time, but like you're like, secretly putting pheromones all over your skin to get them to like you more.
Is that
So
a
like
thing?
also is there I don't know. I think so.
I think it might be.
Yeah, it's a thing.
If you're a pheromone company, you can reach out to us for
Sponsored by pheromones. Okay.
lots of
Um, somebody said, is it too late? How can we shift and have these conversations while married? It is never too late.
never. And on
Start
top of that,
today.
you should start today. And also, even if you've had these conversations, they can shift over the course of your marriage.
Oh, somebody brought that up. Wait, can I read the
Yeah,
question?
please, please.
Somebody said, I had some of these conversations before getting married, and our goals have changed as we got older. How to readdress these conversations? Example, where I want to live/put down roots.
I think it's common that
Yeah, no, well,
these,
most people change throughout their lives. So, like recontracting in all relationships, right? You would recontract at work. You would
yeah,
ask for a raise. You would ask for a different job title. You would ask for different responsibilities. Recontracting is a huge part of any relationship and an important part of communication. If things shift when we become parents, when we buy a home, if we start a business, as our parents get older, we're taking care of them, we must recontract. And we mean an exact expressive contract. We do not mean an unconscious or unspoken contract, things we make assumption with. Well, we had kids, so now I think he's going to stop drinking.
right.
Doesn't work like that.
It's interesting now that we're talking about it because, obviously our program at the therapy group is called premarital. It's a premarital program, but maybe we have to change the name because I think that
Well, I think it was originally called Making Your Marriage Work, the
right.
e-course.
The e-course was,
But
but
this is
the
live,
in-person,
baby.
the live in-person program, um, because I think that there is something to be said about rehaving these
Yeah.
conversations and maybe it's not the full thing. Maybe like it's in certain contexts, right? If you already had the conversation about not having kids, you made the choice to not have kids. Doesn't mean you have to have, if you're both on the same page, but
Mhm.
if there needs to be a conversation about a goal that was changed throughout your marriage, that is something to dive into. And so to expect that some of these, even though you have the conversation before you get married, it is possible that some of these things can change and you
Mhm.
might not have control over that. You will not have control over it when it comes to your partner. Your partner's views can change at any time, but you can prepare as much as possible knowing that you are on the same page where you are at when you are getting married.
Yeah. We had to talk about finances.
Ooh, fun.
Because there was 1 million questions about finances. And when I say that word, everyone has the same exact reaction as Jen, which is Ugh, fun.
Ugh.
And part of this, somebody wrote in how to talk about finances and debt. I have a lot of shame around this.
Mm,
We've talked about this before in the show, but I will work with people for a fucking decade and we will talk about everything, childhood sexual abuse, you know what I mean? Like so much horrible things that include shame. And then 10 years later, they're like, and I have credit card debt. And I'm like, wow, man, that shit is so deep.
so deep.
That was like where the deepest shame is. And I think for so many of us, we're worried about what it says about us.
Yep.
As if we don't live in an impossible world that tells people to open up credit cards at a very young age and doesn't teach people any information about money and finances.
Yeah.
And most of us, right? We've had Amanda Clayton, who was the amazing financial therapist. We should have her on again. She was
She was
so
incredible.
great. And that was
Yeah.
like a really early season.
Yeah, it was.
And she really talked a lot about that our relationships with finance is developed around ages 4 and 5.
Mm,
What is modeled for us? And so for so much of this, we have shame because we feel like it says something about us. But I would just say that it's just something we have to figure out. It's just information. And talking about it earlier is going to be something that's better to deal with. But I've also seen, as everyone knows, I love Reddit. I mean, you'll see people on Reddit that talk about like, oh, I just found out that my partner has more debt than I realized. And people will be like, divorce them. Like, what the fuck? Like, Reddit loves telling people to get divorced. It's unbelievable. If you spend like 5 seconds on like, you think you're an asshole or would I be the asshole if, or like 2 opinions, like those are all subreddits. Everyone is just like, get divorced, get divorced, get divorced. If you listen to
Drop
Reddit,
'em.
if you listen to Reddit, that divorce rate's like sky high again. Listen, money, sex, in-laws. This shit is complex.
Yeah.
And when there's complexity, there is emotions around it. And emotions can often make us shut down. That does not mean that person is a liar or bad. It means that it's fucking complex.
Especially shame, right?
Yes.
Shame keeps us quiet. And,
Mhm.
Brene Brown always talks about how the opposite of shame is vulnerability. And to have vulnerable conversations around money, something
Yeah.
that's so difficult to talk about. And that's the thing is it heightens, I mean, even in my relationship, talking about it, like heighten, you can feel in both of us, it like
Yeah.
heightens our emotions so much to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I am like constantly regulating when I'm having conversations about money, like internally. I'm just like
Even with you
regulate.
and I,
Yeah. Oh, I'm
when we
like,
have when we have to have conversations around money with the business, it's fucking hard.
it's so hard. And it's like regulate. It's like, and you can feel it, right? Like we're both like regulating so
Yes.
much because of the amount of emotion that money brings up. And I
Yeah.
also think sometimes the shame around it comes from this idea that like it shouldn't be emotional.
Mm,
When you think about money, you like kind of don't
mm.
think about it as an emotional thing for whatever reason.
Yeah,
It
that's
is,
interesting.
and it is so emotional.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
drives, for a lot of us, what it means something different for a lot of us. Like for
Mhm.
me, money means like freedom, right? Like I can make decisions, I can do, right? But there's an emotional attachment to it.
Mhm.
And so I
And
think to
what's mine?
what, yeah, what's yours?
Mine's like money comes and goes. Like I'm way more detached
Yes.
from money than you are.
Yeah. Oh,
You have
100%.
way more of a scarcity mindset with money. For me,
It's
I'm like, this
not
shit's always coming. It's always like
right.
going.
Not even a question.
Yeah.
That is
So,
very clear.
but because of mine, sometimes I can be frivolous
Right.
and not make good financial decisions or make impulsive financial decisions. And then sometimes for you, that can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
And for me, feeling like I can't spend is overwhelming, right? So like you
Right.
see this thing, it's not that one of us is right or the other is wrong, is that there definitely should be the fucking in the middle between both
Yes.
of us because we're both extremes.
And I think we have inched so much. And it's funny because Emily is married to someone like me and I'm married to someone like Emily, which is so funny.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, but I think that's common, right? That you end up with someone who is kind of like on the other end of the spectrum, that beautiful
Yeah.
opposites attract thing.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about what were you going to say? You going to bring up
I was
another
going to just
question?
read this. No, I was going to read this specific question.
Yeah, tell
So
me.
somebody had said, so let's take on this, how to approach discussions around shared financial responsibilities. So a lot of people are saying is how do we talk about this, right?
Mm,
And I think you have a good opportunity to say is that like, I love you. And I want us to be married for fucking forever till we're both in the goddamn ground. And with that, I want us to make sure that we're on the same page financially. Is there a good time that we could sit down and talk about what are our shared financial goals? For some people, their shared financial goals is like, I want to save as much fucking money as possible and retire early. For other people, it's, you know what? I love my job. I love what I do. I never want to retire, but I want to be able to travel a lot now and use my money now. For some people, it's, oh, I want to invest in this house, or I want to invest in properties, or I want to, it's, there's no right or wrong. The hard part is oftentimes if you Google financial gurus, it is a very black and white idea. But we
Mhm.
don't agree with that because we're couples therapists, and what works for one couple might not work for you. So sitting down and saying, what does this mean? And also, can I hear my partner? And can I be honest and express myself? And what is the emotions I have around money?
I think that one thing is that has been really helpful, at least in my relationship, is being really curious about why my partner like feels the way they do about money.
Mhm.
You know, that it isn't a conversation about like this specific instance. It's like, well, tell me like why you feel that way. And like I can understand, I can like understand why on the other end of the spectrum, like he'll be like, we could die tomorrow. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. You're right. Like, why? And so it helps me to move a little bit in,
Yeah.
the middle to be able to say, like, that's fair.
And what needs to be said is we could live for forever.
And we could live for forever. And so we inch, we
Because mine's like,
inch,
yeah, fuck it.
and we inch towards the middle. So I think sometimes when we're really anxious about something, when we're really,
Mhm.
there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of emotion around it, we hold on so strongly to our point of view, and it doesn't allow the space to be able to really hear the other side of it. And so to get curious with your partner about like, tell me what money means to you. Tell me about like why you feel that way. Like take me into that because I think we get so stuck on like a topic, right? Like, oh, we should pay for this or we shouldn't pay for this as opposed to being like, tell me the emotions that you have around money. Tell me like where that comes from for you. Like get really curious about your partner's point of view and then express your point. Listen, I understand. Like I get that. I totally understand why you would feel that way. For me, this is how I grew up and this is why it's so hard for me. It brings up a lot of anxiety for me to do it that way. So like let's talk about like what that looks like in the context of our relationship.
Mhm. Now, what happens, let's say, if somebody goes into a relationship and let's say they get together and they're both making a lot of money, enjoying life, somebody loses a job. You have to recontract.
Yes.
Now, what does our budget look like? Now, what do we spend money on? Now, how do we suss this all out? Things have to change as life changes. You see this a ton of people. You have one parent who starts to stay at home. Many people know that my husband was a stay at home dad, amazing stay at home dad. He said it was the worst job he's ever had. Um, he was like, this job sucks. No one respects me, and I don't fucking get paid, and I don't get promotions.
And my boss
My boss
is
is a
5 years
dictator.
old.
My boss is a fucking dictator. This shit sucks. Um, and that time we were a single income household. So how we spent money needed to be very different than how we were before. And now he works and has a job. And I think we didn't do a great job of talking about that because it was really fucking hard to give up some of the luxuries we had grown accustomed to.
Yeah.
Change is hard.
Change is so hard. It's so hard. And
Yeah.
sometimes you're going so quickly that it's like you don't have it almost feels like you don't have the time to talk about it,
Hmm.
which I think is why like having this like premarital program is so important because it almost forces you to have these conversations.
Yeah.
Um, but and you're just like, oh God, like, like the same reaction I had when you're like, let's talk about finances. Like that is a common reaction. Like, who wants to sit down and talk about that? No one. But it's so important
No.
because it's going to come out in other ways if you don't.
Well, and the other thing is once you get on the same page and you're hitting those goals, those conversations actually don't suck as much.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Those
They're
conversations,
easier.
yes, those conversations when you're like, hell yeah, we did it this week. We did it. We saved this amount of money. all of a sudden it's exciting to do that, right? So like before, if me and my husband talked about money, it was so anxiety producing for me. Now I'm like, hey, look at this amount that we have that we talked about. We're getting there. Here's this goal. Now we can do this thing. So I think the thing is everything sucks at first.
Yes.
Most, I won't say everything, most things suck at first. And slowly having conversations, you get more and more comfortable about the topic. It is exposure therapy. But especially if you came from a family where they didn't ever talk about money, it's going to feel so uncomfortable at first.
Or if
And
there was like so much like tension around money,
yeah,
right? Like there was just a lot of if you really like struggled with money, if your family struggled with money growing up, like the tension around it too.
yeah. Um, somebody said you should recommend Ramit see these. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I'm so sorry. Book and podcast for how to do money talk to their partners. So we've never heard of that, but hey, someone else thought it was great. You should check it out too. Okay. Um, let's talk about sex. So let's say you get together with your partner and you're having lots of sex, man. Shit's good. Life's fun. There's alcohol. We're partying. Sexy, sexy, sexy. No responsibilities. Great. You had a dog. Sex is still okay, but you got this puppy crying. What do I do? Blah,
It's
blah, blah.
looking at you.
Looking at you, right? You get a mortgage. You get a job where you work late. You have a kid. I'm imagining your sex life is going to change in some way. For some of us, it changes a ton. For other people, it's just some, but it's going to change at some point. How do you have a conversation at the beginning of your relationship about eventually, because all sex and intimacy ebbs and flows, how is it going to be for us if that goes away for a little bit? How's it going to be if I literally can't have sex? I'm pregnant, I get put on pelvic rest, or I'm postpartum and I can't have sex, or I have some type of pain happening, or I have medical stuff. What happens if I can't have sex? What's this going to mean for us? How do we want to handle it as we get there? And I know that's uncomfortable, and we all love saying, "Well, that won't happen to us," and it's you're wrong. I'm so sorry, you're
Simply
wrong.
wrong.
It's going to happen because life happens.
Yeah. So often we hear couples come in and say, "Well, we were having so much sex when we first met."
I know it's so sweet. It's
It's
great.
so sweet. Well, we were going out, we were having such a fun time. We were having sex every night.
Same.
Times were different.
Times were different.
And so that's another piece of like understanding the expectations of relationships and what happens in long-term relationships.
Mm-hmm.
That is part of it. And so it's not about that not happening. It's about what do you do? How do you prepare for when sex ebbs and flows? When your connection ebbs and flows? What does that look like? How do you communicate about it? How personally are you taking it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Ooh, how
Um,
personal are you taking it? Yeah.
because I think that's a big piece, right? If we don't communicate about that, then one partner could be the partner with the higher libido
Mm-hmm.
is, initiating sex, and the other partner's too tired, stressed, there's a lot going on. It feels very personal. The thing that once was making you feel connected to your partner is no longer there. The thing that once was making you feel really loved by your partner is no longer there.
Mm-hmm.
And so to be able to have a conversation about that of this is, I'm not feeling loved, or I'm not feeling this connection. And I want to talk about that, because are there ways for us to feel connected? And is there ways that I can feel loved in other ways if sex is, right now, is not on the table?
Yeah. So it goes, right? So somebody had asked, how will you change, how you will change as people as you age and the relationship becomes different, how to grow together. Have you met your partner in their growth? You are so right. This is going to change. Do you create time to get to know that new person? That means, do I leave time for date nights? Do I leave time for asking each other about ourselves? I think so often people think, well, we've been together forever. We know everything. It's a lie. It's a lie, 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 lie. It's all a lie. You will change. Tell me about something new you learned about yourself this year. What's something new you learned about our relationship this year? What's something new you learned about me this year? Have you met your partner now? And how do you feel about that person? It's okay because it's not the version you fell in love with. Can you love that version of them? What parts about them do you love with that? And what parts are taking some time to get adjusted to?
One of the reasons why it might be tough to, or we hit these kind of like pain points when our partners are changing. I think because when our partners are changing, it's something that is out of our control, right? It's something that's out of our control, yet affects our lives. And in any relationship, when someone changes, it's hard for us, right? We so often want to keep people in this box because there's a fear of they change, then the relationship is going to change. And so I'm going to hold on tightly to like what I know, and I'm going to hold on to the person that I know, because without that, then like I have to adjust. And so sometimes our partner changing can bring up our own anxiety about like, what does this mean for our relationship? What we have to do is recognize the anxiety that it's bringing up for us, because without that recognition, we might be reacting to it to try to hold our partner back in this spot. And then it causes these fights and these pain points, as opposed to saying, okay, I understand this is bringing up anxiety for me, but how do I like listen to my partner, get to know my partner, like you were saying, and really understand the place that they're coming from? They're allowed to change just as I'm allowed to change in the relationship.
Mm,
Right? If something was changing for me, would I want my partner to try to hold me back or hold me in this place where I was? No, you want the freedom to also be able to change in the context of the relationship. So how can you be a good supportive partner and regulate your own emotions, your own anxiety while your partner is making this change? And just to recognize, yeah, this is bringing up something for me. How can I work through that for myself so that I can give that space to my partner?
Um, I just want to know your thought about this one.
Tell me.
Someone asked, do you think it's easier for someone who comes from a dysfunctional family to be in a relationship with someone who also has trauma?
I don't know if easier is
Yeah,
the
I said not
word.
necessarily. Yeah.
I wouldn't say easier. I would say that I think that it happens because it feels like you're able to relate to the person in
Hmm.
a different way. Um, and so I wonder if that's what easier means, is that like there's this like understanding. What I think is important if you have childhood trauma, your partner has childhood trauma, is that you are both doing your individual work so that you are doing whatever you can to not bring it into the relationship, and that you can communicate about it with each other in a way that feels really productive for the relationship. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't say easier, but I would say I understand why it happens, because it feels like you can relate so much more to each other.
Yeah. Um, uh, I really want to hear what you have to say about this one.
Okay.
How to address childhood trauma when you're not sure if they can receive the information or had a perfect childhood.
How to adjust child when you're not sure if they okay. So
No one has a perfect childhood.
yes.
You got trauma. If you think that your childhood was perfect,
I like that we have to say this is in quotes.
yeah, yeah, perfect. The person thinks that it. So the hard part is your partner doesn't think they have any experience or childhood issues,
Yes.
which people love to believe.
Yes.
Husband. Now that my husband doesn't commute anymore, doesn't listen to the show anymore, so I can really
Oh,
say
so it
whatever I
really
want.
works out. Right. It's
Yeah,
really
he used to like
perfect.
listen to some episodes. Your husband's never heard it.
Never. Not once. And
But
he's like,
now,
let me come on the podcast. He wants to come on so bad. Still got him for that. Um, you know, I think something really important is, first of all, just like this blanket statement in general, that someone else doesn't have to have trauma to understand or be able to be there for you in yours. And so I'm wondering, if are you holding back to talk about what you went through because you don't believe that your partner will be able to be there for you? Is that based in your relationship, or is that based in the fact that no one was able to be there for you growing up? And because of that, right? When you grow up in a household where you're parentified or you're going through something, and an adult couldn't be there for you in your time of need, as an adult, it's sometimes hard to believe that other people are going to be able to be there for you now. So I'm wondering how much of this is based in what you went through growing up, or is it based in the fact that you have tried to open up about what you went through and your partner was unable to be there for you? If it is based in your current relationship, then to slowly open up those conversations, right? To say, like, you don't have to understand to be able to hear me and be here for me while I talk to you about it. I don't need you to fix this. I don't, and here is what I need when I talk to you about it. I need you to listen. You know, if you're curious, you can ask me questions. I don't need you to fix it. Um, Talk about the things you need in that conversation. They might need some guidance on how to be there for you. And my question would also be, do you even know how they can be there for you? If no one was there for you growing up at the times in which you needed them, it's possible you might not even know what you need. And so, really get to know, what is it that I need in this conversation? What does this look like for me? If my parent was able to give me what I needed growing up, what would that have looked like? How do you bring that into your relationship now?
We have to move on to Dear Em and Jen.
Let's
But
do
I
it.
want to say, if any of this resonated with you, please reach on out. We have this awesome premarital program that we do. There, you can read more about it at our website at therapygroup.com. Check it out. Kelly and Kate, who are currently running it, are fucking awesome. Okay. Dear Em and Jen, thank you so much for all you do. I love the podcast. I'm getting married this summer and feeling extremely torn about doing a father daughter dance. For context, as long as I can remember, I've had a difficult relationship with my dad. Growing up, he was always angry, overbearing, controlling, and didn't allow me to make any decisions for myself. Whenever I would ask why he was telling me no to something I asked to do, he would scream, because I said so, or because I'm the parent. Every once in a while, my mom would jump in, take my side, and convince him to let me go wherever I was asking to go. But most of the time, the conversation ended in me being grounded for talking back. The dynamic only got worse as I got older. I am now 30 years old and still have a very strained relationship. About 4 months ago, everything shifted when my dad started going to therapy. Through therapy, he was able to communicate to me, my mom, and my brother that he was sexually abused by the local priest when he was a child. This abuse happened multiple times when he was 9 and 10 years old. He also told us he'd been struggling with sex addiction for the last 15 years. He said it started right around the time his dad, my grandfather, passed away. Thinking about what he went through as a child makes me feel very sad, and I feel so bad for him. I cannot imagine carrying something so heavy for over 50 years. At the same time, I feel angry that he was essentially living a double life for 15 years. I'm angry he betrayed my mom and hurt he lied to me and my brother. However, knowing about his childhood and addiction does make me understand him more and why he parented the way he did. How do I separate feeling bad for him as a child and angry at him for his 15-year addiction? How do I overcome my anger? I don't want to do a father daughter dance at my wedding because I don't feel we have ever had a good relationship, but I also feel guilty for not wanting to. I know he's been through so much and is working very hard to repair his relationship with me, my brother, and my mom. So I feel like I will make things even worse by telling him he won't be doing a dance at my wedding. Should I feel uncomfortable? Should I feel uncomfortable at my wedding so I don't hurt his feelings?
Wow. First of
How
all,
awesome is this person? The fucking
you're
insight,
amazing. Oh my
empathy.
God.
This person has done some fucking awesome work. We adore you.
The first thing I want to say is that yes, you can understand that your dad went through a lot. You can have empathy for your dad. And at the same time, you can still hold the pain for what you went through. And it's okay for you to feel pain in that relationship and have empathy for him at the same time. One does not have to exist without the other. And I know that can be really hard, is to hold both things. But for you to be able to have empathy for him, but also empathy for yourself at the same time is really, really important. And it's wonderful that he is doing the work that he's doing, that he's able to talk to you about, like, these are the reasons why I really struggled with this. Um, but you are still allowed to feel how you feel. It doesn't take away from the emotion that you feel in that relationship. And I wonder if because he's going through this, there's this push to like let go of that anger and let go of kind of the pain you feel. But you also get to work through that on your own. Just because he is at this place doesn't mean you have to be at a different place or you have to be letting go of this. You get to decide when you do that. That gets to be your own journey. Um, and so, in terms of a father daughter dance, I think that it brings up another question of how we so often feel like we have to follow this mold of what a wedding looks like, you know, because there's this expected father daughter dance. I must do that. But you get to decide what you do at your wedding. And this is a day for you to feel really authentic, for you to be really connected with your partner. And I think it's really important to set boundaries around that. It goes back to the conversation around you are now creating a boundary around your new family. And so it sounds like one of the things you're struggling with is going from, okay, I'm, protecting dad and putting a boundary around the family I grew up in, moving and transitioning over into creating a boundary around this new family I'm creating. So for you to make a decision that feels right for you, I think it also signifies that you are now creating a boundary around the new family you're making by getting married.
I'm thinking a lot about the question they asked of how do I separate feeling bad for him as a child and angry at him for his 15-year addiction. And I think, we've talked about this on many episodes, but this is the duality. This is holding the complexity of people, which is you can have empathy and sympathy and love and understanding for someone and be really fucking hurt by them.
Yeah.
And they're not mutually exclusive. And I'm also wondering, has there been enough space for them to express their anger? You let your dad come to you and tell you this information. Was there also family therapy that was able to happen afterwards? That's great. Your dad got this care, but you deserve to be able to express your anger too. I don't know if that's going to help you overcome it, but I know it's a step.
Yeah. That's our episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Shrink Chicks.
We'll see you back here next week for another session.
In the meantime, if you want a question answered or a topic discussed, follow us on Instagram at ShrinkChicks. And if you're looking to get connected with a therapist like us to start or continue your therapeutic journey, visit thetherapygroup.com. Just fill out a contact form on our website, and we will personally match you with one of our amazing therapists. And for all of our therapists and group practice owners out there, we also offer group practice consulting.
And if you're looking to support yourself further and support our show, check out our amazing merch options at shrinkchicks.com/merch and our Know Yourself, Grow Yourself journal on Amazon. Also, if you'd be so kind, we'd love a rating review and for you to share with a friend or an enemy or a mother-in-law, honestly, whoever needs it, so that we can keep reaching more people on our mission to bring mental health topics to your ears every week.
Thanks for being here with us. And don't forget to grow yourself. You got to know yourself.